This is the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and I Chan, and also all the others that have lost their life as a direct result of psychiatric harms.
Okay. Welcome back. Thanks for listening. Recently, I did a fast, prolonged water only fast, which was really fantastic. And I think I did a month kind of wrap up. So I don't even know where I'm at. I think I've got to be approaching 2 months here. But when it's time to talk, it's just time to talk. As time has gone on, I've done a lot of thinking about the changes that I saw during the fast and why they occurred. And then why the things that are happening after the fast are happening, and kind of and everything in between. Really, it's just I'm just thinking often about what happened and why, and some of these profound changes that I've had. What caused them? Was it the fast? Was it something else? um what was going on during the fast? There's all kinds of questions that kind of run through my mind, but I think the maybe these segments of recordings are going to be my ability or my effort to try to get those things down and articulate them for people that want to hear about it. I think it's incredibly important. And these are all the things that I would want to understand if I was going to do a fast, or that I just want to understand about the human mind and body in general. So I might fragment these. I realize that when I sit down to do a podcast, every single time I do it, there's a lot of things I forget. And I don't I don't like that. Um, but if I capture all my really good thoughts, they tend to be broken up over different time periods. And then I'm like, man, I don't have time to sit down and just do a podcast or to capture my thoughts right now. So I'm working on trying to get an app, maybe so on my phone I can just record things and then piece them together later. But as of right now, I'm just going to try to sit down when I have a really good thought, that I think is important, and put it down. And then I'll just string the podcast together as I think through the different things. So I know I'm going to give an update on like kind of how I've been doing since in the last month since my fast, and kind of let people in on that. But there's some other thoughts that I've had that are just highly important, and I think far more important than that I wanted to share. And so something happened to me on the fast that really I've been piecing together afterwards, but I was talking about it while I was fasting a little bit. And that's this: you come into this state in the fast where, at least I did, it seems to make sense to me when looking at the literature and other people's experience, that they'd be going through the same thing based on what they're writing about and how, but they don't seem to articulate it very well, in my opinion. And if you were to ask me, I would say my brain became highly or almost completely plastic during the fast, meaning like my patterns changed, my habits changed very quickly, the way I was thinking changed a lot. And that just, for someone that's injured, that's been in a really negative state for a long time, and that's middle-aged, you realize it's very hard to change your thinking patterns and your habits. And like for me, um, when, say, like waking up early was always a negative for me, right? I didn't like it, but I always had to wake up early, so I always did. So I was trying to break this habit of waking up early, but the harder I tried to break it, the worse I kind of felt. And so it took me a number of years to stop waking up like at really early, like 5 or 6, and to just let my body sleep in and get some extra sleep. And it was just a horrible task. I think when you're injured with a chronic illness or an injury, then you're already in kind of an agitated state. So doing this is even harder, right? Or it's more, there's more pain involved. So um when I was on the fast, doing these things, changing my habits, yeah, at first it was kind of hard, but we're talking about a couple of days. And after a couple of days, like things would completely shift and I would be fine. And I would be doing different things at different times. My habits were completely different than what I had been doing in the past. Obviously, I'm not eating, things aren't centered around meals anymore, you know. And then my thinking became really fluid, and I started thinking about things in much different dimensions that I had in the past. And I'd spent a lot of time in therapy and just thinking through things, trying to, like, why I made the mistakes that I did, thinking about my life that I had lived to this point, and why I made the decisions I did, and how they had landed me in this spot. All those things are really important to me to understand them well. But I always kind of had the same thoughts around them. But as I was going through the fast, my thoughts would really zoom out, and I got a lot of different perspective and had a lot of different thoughts that I had never had before, that were completely organic. This literally wasn't being, this wasn't a catalyst of having talked to someone else and gotten different perspective and really deeply thinking about that because I had more time on my hands. And that was really organic. I was thinking more because I had more time on my hands, but I've had tons of time on my hands before the fast as well, and it really didn't come to that. That really didn't happen. So, and then I started, doing different activities all the time, and being spurred to do different activities and motivated to do things I hadn't done in a very long time, and writing about them, thinking about them, and figuring them out. This is all very different than it's been for years on end for me. And I've made really big efforts to just try to change my life and change my patterns so that I could just experience something different. And so, thinking about this as I'm coming off the fast, this really, and combined with the fact that on the fast, I stopped stressing, I stopped being depressive. My akathisia resolved down to, like, I had 2 little bouts of it on the fast, that it was completely gone virtually. I had 2 like 5-minute bouts that were, of course, excruciating, but they were so short-lived. In the past, they just last for hours and hours, if not days. So that was a huge change, even though it wasn't completely resolved. But it has been completely resolved as well after the fast for me so far. I've endured stress and even a little bit of panic, but they're really, I can see very clearly the difference between that and what I experienced as akathisia. So, just thinking through these things, there's a really, really big shift in thinking, which relates really closely in my mind to neuroplasticity and being in a plastic state where your brain's free to switch, between different things, and it's not stuck in the same patterns. So if you think about that in a wider kind of lens, or from a wider perspective, really, it's got a tremendous possible value, because really healing from chronic injury, from different things like tinnitus, and, man, I can't think of too many right now, but I mean, I know they're out there. Neuroplasticity is like kind of a cutting edge way to handle a lot of chronic incurable things, because they seem to be highly involved with psychology, right? We get into these thought patterns. We kind of expect ourselves to be subject to this injury or this illness that we've had, and our brain creates lots of, negative, like endorphins, stress hormones, and all this stuff throughout our body, which keeps us inflamed and keeps us in this troubled state. So if we can shift out of that, our healing can happen much more rapidly, and we can process trauma and do all this work to try to grow and to change. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of our injury and disability and illness comes from psychologically being stuck in a place where we believe, that's where we are, and or our thought processes just repeat over and over and over again in this pattern. And it's just really hard to break. And it becomes the more pained and kind of anxious we are, the harder it is to break those things as well. Because while being calm, peaceful, and kind of joyful is shown to increase plasticity, anxiety and pain, these things have been shown to decrease plasticity and increase rigidity of thinking. We kind of get locked into these, little trauma scapes where we relive things over and over again, and we just know our suffering is going to be so bad, and it kind of manifests itself. So there's this paradigm of feeling things intensely because we believe we're going to feel it intensely, whereas, you've seen it in other situations, right? Someone might break their leg, and start screaming, and be in all this pain. And then someone else may break their leg and not know it, right? And be fine for a while, right? And then even someone that knows they're going to recover well and has high level confidence that they're not going to experience as much pain psychologically, because they're like, this pain is temporary, it's transient, it's going to go away. So, it's not such a big deal. That's what I've experienced myself as well. I've just seen it be true. So plasticity seems to play a big factor in these things, as I understood it in the past. But going through the fast, it's changed the lens that I see it through. And I'm wondering how much of the healing that I experienced on my fast was from a plasticity change, and how much was from, digestive change and clean out, neurological rest, cellular change and healing that happened on the fast that we know happens. What's coming from what? Because if we think about these things and we look to them, it can tell us a lot about, how beneficial neuroplastic techniques are, and how important neuroplasticity is, how important is, digestion and food, how important is your psychological processes and kind of the way you handle things psychologically. What impact is this having on your health? There's this whole discipline that I'm looking into now based on what I experienced in the fast, called like limbic retraining, and these neuroplastic techniques that are working people into thinking more positively about things and changing their perspective. I've already read several books on this. I read Rock Steady by Joey Remini, and then I read The Brain That Changes Itself as well by Norman Doidge, I think. That's how you say his last name, but maybe I'm wrong. Probably butchered that. But these books focus on, how impactful it is that we just look at things differently and we change our psychology, and it creates vastly more positive, different outcomes. So looking at it through that lens, I know the drastic change in plasticity had a big impact on my healing as well. And as I've been coming off of that, I've actually, because I didn't know that before I went into the fast, as I've come off the fast, I've really just picked up some of my old routines and habits and things that kind of served me well, or are just easy to get back into again. And I've been feeling some negativity and like some harm kind of come back in, like being tired at certain times, or like having really negative kind of destructive thinking kind of loops that just start up that make me feel negative, crappy, slow, anxious, these kinds of things. And while they're far less infrequent than they were, they are cropping up. And I'm asking myself, like, is this because the fasting isn't working, or is this because I'm thinking negatively? Because because I don't know what else to do, right? Or I'm just picking them back up because it's just what's easy for me. And really, so after the fast, I had this kind of situation where I was panicking, and I couldn't tell if it was because I had eaten had chose to like indulge and like eat some sugary pancakes or whatever it was, some nutty stuff, or whether I was becoming mentally exhausted and falling back into a negative thinking pattern. Well, when I tested it, so I ingested a bunch of sugar and stuff that I typically wouldn't eat, and really you're not supposed to eat ever, and you wouldn't want to do after the fast. I did a bunch of that stuff, but I stayed in a positive mindset, and I did some constructive stuff afterwards, had some fun, just had time to myself. Things I knew I would work with positively, and I was very restful as well. I didn't overtax my brain. I just hung out, like kind of an ideal day, right? It's fine. Like I did really, really, really well. But then I ate well, and I kind of overtaxed myself. I let myself exceed kind of the levels that I knew I could do mentally. Like for instance, if I just keep going all morning, I just jump from task to task to task, and I don't rest mentally. I have the physical energy, right? But if I don't rest mentally and just sit down and just let my brain take a break, I'll go into this negative kind of scheme, and then I'll start getting physical symptoms. So I did that as well, and that's actually what elicited like the physiological negatives that I had been having so much in the past in such vast quantity for so long. And that really, it really spoke to me. I'm really looking through things through a very, very different lens now. So conversely, since that moment, when I've been feeling bad, right, I've been asking myself, did you have the negative thoughts first and this kind of circular negative thinking first? Or, did you have sugar, or, did you have these little triggers did you do something, you overexert yourself mentally? What's causing the negative stuff you're feeling right now? And inevitably, I've really tied it back to negative circular thinking. Even when I'm mentally exhausted, I, right now and before, tie that really closely with extreme negativity and feeling, ignore that. So I associate that with a high level of negativity. So then I had to ask myself, you know, what's going on here? Turn off my phone. Okay, there we go. So, what's causing this? Is the mental exhaustion and negativity. Inevitably, even if I'm mentally exhausted, but I relax, and stay positive and, think differently about things, I really don't experience the negative symptoms. I'm just mentally exhausted, and then, but I don't physically get fatigued. I don't, experience stress and panic, right? I can actually kind of work through it. So since I have worked through these things and learned from them, I actually have realized that, this is a neuroplastic issue. These things are manifesting from negative thinking. And as I've looked through it and done some research online, I realize it's a huge thing. There's this limbic retraining and neuroplastic kind of training that over a longer period of time are training people out of these habits and folding in positive kind of different thinking and using that to overcome chronic illnesses like Lyme's disease, like autoimmunes and different things like that. Because what they're finding is that those conditions are actually held in place along with a myriad of other kind of mystery conditions that kind of every human being is exposed to, like Lyme's disease, or not everybody's exposed to Lyme's disease, but a lot of people are, and their body overcomes it, right? Same with autoimmune, like your body can have an immune response and keep it healthy. Other ones like go nuts, right? Well, if you're in a chronic state of stress and your neuroplasticity is low, right, and you're kind of caught in this negative thinking loop because you start having negative impacts on your body, and then you're thinking more negatively because your body is not reacting well and you're having these physical symptoms, right? Your brain is actually triggering a chronic like in state of inflammation in both your brain and the rest of your body that's keeping you trapped in this disorder, and this is the theory. But as I'm learning this stuff and looking at it in my own condition, I'm asking myself a lot of really, really critical questions like, how have I been interpreting these illnesses and these harms in our community and at large for people? How have I been interpreting them? It seems like there's this archetype of personality of kind of like type A people pleasers, empaths, highly sensitive people that are falling victim to this type of stuff, where other people are being exposed to all the same poisons and toxins, like in the environment, in their food, and like even chronic stress and stuff, but they don't seem to care and everything's fine, right? So, and then they're not getting the autoimmune, they're not getting these chronic conditions and these injuries. So what's the difference? And at first I thought, well, it's just this personality type kind of predisposes them to this injury. They're just under more stress, and that's it. That's how they get it. But now that I'm looking at it through a different lens from my fast and then from what I've been learning since the fast, I'm wondering if it's not necessarily that these people, this group, right, that I am in as well, is different or looks at things in that way, but rather it's that we're developing these negative thinking patterns because maybe we're more susceptible to them, or we're more likely to encourage ourselves in that because maybe of past trauma, like a lot of different reasons, right? What if that's the core reason? The neuroplasticity issue is what's keeping us there. What if that's the mechanism by which we're coming in and out of this place by a lack of plasticity or an abundance of plasticity? This is how people are getting out of this stuff. And in the past, I really would have had no way to verify whether that was true or not. But through the prolonged water only fast, I feel like I've gotten some perspective on it that's really, really valuable and far different than any comparative or experiential evidence that I've had in the past to let me really figure that out. So based on my experience, that's what I'm really looking at right now. And that's what I'm testing and I'm working towards. And for the first time, in my life, I'm starting to feel like maybe like I can steer my way out of this. I don't have to think that just accepting a horrible condition or really difficult, really painful condition for the rest of my life or for the indefinite future is what I have to deal with. I'm starting to think that you can actually think your way out of this, or a large part of it. A while back, I did some really strict dieting and stuff, and I had a few moments of like happiness and clarity, really briefly, and when I had those, I was just thinking, you know what? I totally lost my train of thought. What was I looking for? I don't know. I can't remember. I'll see if I can come back to it. But again, I'm just picking this up, trying to run with it. My thoughts for now to try to just get them down and share them. But yeah, so I'll just move on. I got another thought that kind of cropped up when I was thinking about that. And so my other thought was, because I think any truth that we find or anything important that we find is going to be validated a million different ways, right? Um, and it really won't be invalidated. We might get clarity. There may be some things that are true or not true about it. We may learn more about what something is and what it's not. But the flip side is that things that are also untrue, we will also they'll continue to be invalidated, as time goes forward and we learn more about them. But with the fasting, the other thing I was thinking about is like, so many of our ancestors and people in history have fasted and prolonged water fasts and longer fasts, and lots of spiritual leaders and whatnot. And I'm thinking, right, like if fasting is really improving neuroplasticity, then there's something a lot more than just going through like a great hardship or having your digestive tract improved going on here for gurus and spiritual leaders and everybody else, right? If you're say you're teaching or you're doing something important, socially as a spiritual leader or someone else, right? And you need perspective, like important perspective on what you're doing and how to go forward, and you're fasting. That change in plasticity after you've been doing something for a long time is just an incredibly valuable tool going forward to shift your perspective and kind of look on what you've been doing and contemplate what you've been doing, and then make any changes that you need to do or clarify what you need to do and give you a new perspective and new energy going forward. So it makes a lot more sense to me that a lot of people in the past fasted and then just had really big life improvements, or just got the energy to keep going and doing really, really hard stuff. I mean, we're talking about like spiritual teachings, or you just being involved in tribe and community, being leaders, different things like that, right? That requires a tremendous amount of mental clarity, drive, and vision, to do those things. And they just don't come about too easily on their own, or we can definitely get stuck in closed loop thinking patterns, kind of. So a prolonged water only fast is, I mean, I'm trying to heal from an injury, but I'm thinking about the tremendous value it would have, and it has had for me in different areas, of considering my life and learning new things and getting different perspectives, right? And changing my thinking patterns. Like it's just all around is a huge deal. And yeah, I have a tremendous more physical health, right? But I also have a tremendous more, mental flexibility and clarity, even though my memory issues are still there. It's one of the things that didn't clear up this time. Um, there's a difference. There's different other, kind of things that have changed and cleared up that is really illuminating or really setting me down a different path of healing that I had considered before, but really didn't understand well enough to be like, okay, I'm just going to dedicate myself to doing that. But now dedicating myself to kind of limbic retraining and neuroplastic techniques is something that I want to do wholeheartedly and go forward for. I got the understanding and the perspective that I needed to just double down and invest in that and go forward, knowing that it's going to give me what I need to a really, really large extent. So I went from feeling like I could heal like a few percentage points a year, to feeling like maybe in this next year, I'll be like 50, 60, 70% healed or something, and just trying to clear up some of the more minor stuff that's going on. I mean, that's a really big if, of course, from the perspective that I have now, I'm still dealing with a tremendous amount of stuff, even though certain fundamental things have improved in a really big way. Like the biggest parts of my injury, have persisted, but I knew that it could take multiple fasts or I keep healing after the fast too. And there's just a lot of work. This is really a practice and a mentality shift going forward. I also ate a bunch of junk after my fast too. And I still am, honestly, I'm still indulging in doing stuff because I haven't for years and years and years. It's just something I want to do right now. And so I'm trying to measure it out and be thoughtful and still recover. But the fact is, after another fast, then I think I want to, now that I've indulged in this way, just kind of enjoying my life and having fun that I've never had before. After the next one, I'm considering being much more diligent and healthy after that fast, so that I can see kind of more, hopefully more clear, prolonged healing and whatnot, and more profound stuff. Whereas now it's been profound, but I feel like I'm just starting a journey. Whereas, before I went into this, I was really hoping like, oh, I'll just knock this out and then I'll be so healed. It'll feel like I'm almost done, where I think our perspective changed right with that as well. Once I had big change, you kind of see, what's still left and what that entails and how big your healing really is. With this stuff, it's your perspective gets really wonky because you're dealing with so many different things. I was telling a friend of mine yesterday that when I had to go through a list of all the things I've been dealing with since my transcranial magnetic stimulation injury, I started crying because it took about 30 minutes to go through the entire list and explain what each one of them was to someone else. If I did like a full, like complete, extensive list, it's just on any given day I complain about certain things because they seem the most prevalent. But the more I think about it, actually I get really doom and gloomy and loop negative thinking because it's just so extensive. And it's so ridiculous. So the more you heal, the more perspective you get on the healing that you have to do. And while you may feel a lot better and have a lot more positive attitude, which is fantastic, it doesn't excuse you from the work that you have to do. And I have to do a lot of work from stuff even before my injury, at least like psychologically and physiologically as well. So when you fast, it doesn't pick and choose, say, oh, I'm gonna heal you from all the stuff from your TMS injury, right? It just starts healing from the inside out. So a lot of stuff I'm sure from before, like my TMS injury has been healed, and then some of the things from my TMS injury seem to have improved. So, it's very unique and kind of organic and different process. It's not going to go exactly the way you think. It's going to be what it is in its own way, in its own time. And it's up to us to try to understand and adapt to that and to accept that and learn from it rather than the other way around and hope that it fits exactly what you want and then go from there. That's just not going to happen. It's just not the way things go. It's too individualistic. It's too complicated. It's too complex for us to ever understand the way things are going to go. So I'm so super grateful that I'm on this path. I have a lot more hope than I've ever had before. And so I'm really glad for that. Yeah. So those are some really big thoughts that I've been kicking around the last few days and the last few weeks. Actually, I've been learning a lot more about them. So I wanted to share them. I wanted to get them down. I had a good time to do it right now. So I hope that was helpful for people. I really see this as a way out of chronic injury and illness. I genuinely see that. Me being the pragmatic person that I am, I realize that this has to work. It has to go forward. It has to be a reality. It has to be validated for it to, really be true. I've seen some really great stuff that I've proven to be true for myself so far. That doesn't extrapolate to everybody else. It doesn't extrapolate perfectly to, chronic illness and all this and injury and all these other things. But it has the potential to, and it hasn't been proven wrong yet. So that's the road we're going on. And this is the world that I'm looking at now through this lens. So we'll see what happens. And if you're listening, then you're along for the ride. It's really cool. I hope it's really productive. I really wish I had something like this to listen to when I was first injured. I'm sure there's stuff like this out there, but I just couldn't find it at the time. So it's also really specific. When you land an injury, you think that no one, people with other similar injuries are very different than yours because maybe the causation was different. But it would be really, really incredible if we found out that a lack of plasticity was responsible for perpetuating, all the vast majority of these chronic illnesses and injuries. Because if we could focus on healing and changing that one thing, your plasticity and your perspective, and that was actually the issue, that was the real physical issue that was going on that could be rectified, and it was responsible for all these different issues, then that would be a really incredible find. Because the way medicine looks at things now, everything has a different specific cure for a gene deficiency, or too much of this mineral or vitamin in your system, or that, or this deficiency or that, and genetic issues and exposure to different things, environmental and otherwise, all those things have really specific answers, but it makes it virtually impossible to find an idiosyncratic kind of injury or illness that you have, right? But if this could help in a big way, and I think it fits the societal paradigm that we're in now of being overstressed and overworked and overstimulated, that all seems to perpetuate a lack of plasticity, right? We can't even think anymore. You talk to people and talking to them for more than 20 seconds and they just lose focus, and they don't even remember what you said. It is the weirdest thing, right? But that's exactly the definition of a lack of plasticity, right? It's getting even worse and worse the more we're exposed to technology and media and stuff, and media groups are honing in on that. They're reinforcing the fact that we have no attention span by giving us shorter and shorter content, snappier, quicker content, just because that's what's selling and that's what's hitting. But it's actually destroying the human brain and the way we function. That fits right into the mass profiteering paradigm as well. Oh, this is destructive, or it may have consequences. We don't care. Just do it. We need to be making money. We need to be profiting and dominating the market, and getting our market share, so it all fits together. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited, but yeah, this is where the rubber hits the road, and we're going to see what happens in the going forward, and see if this is the real deal or not. And I'll certainly be checking in and sharing my thoughts and perspectives on it so that everyone can see it. They'll be able to see clearly, what it was like for someone before, these changes were made, and then what's going on after, because I started this podcast well before, I started this endeavor. So you get to see the real thing, not just, sometimes I get a little skeptical. Someone's like, I'm healed and now I'm sharing my experience, when you had no idea what they were like before, or it's maybe hard to get at that information and you have to do a lot of background work. But I think that's an interesting perspective, and I hope that people get that from this. But anyways, maybe I'll string this together with another one if I have any other thoughts going forward. Maybe I'll just drop this one now that I've talked for a while. I feel like I nailed just most of the stuff of what's been going on, what I've been thinking lately. But thanks for listening. Take care.